Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. Hope you're very, very well indeed, as per usual. I'm Michael Bott.
And I'm Rupert Soskin.
And today we're bringing you episode 53 of our regular series, Unicorns and Rainbows in the Stone Age Debunked, a journey into the Neolithic heart of darkness with your host, Rupert Soskin. Rupert, over to you. Tell the good folks what we're talking about.
Why, thank you so much. I'll tell you what, heart of darkness, quite right. This is an interesting one because this has been triggered by excavations at a particular site in the Rhone Valley in southeast France, going back 5,000 years ago, and it's incaprettamento. It's basically ritual strangulation sacrifice, and what this research is about, it's focused on this site, or it started on this site, but it's actually about this practice of ritual sacrifice having been used across Europe for potentially 2,000 years. That's the crux of it. And it's interesting how it's cropped up, so how they know that it's this form of ritual sacrifice, if you like, or certainly ritual murder, is they've found some skeletons like this. They've even got rock art depicting it. So that's it in a nutshell. It's an interesting piece of research.
So, I mean, it's been picked up in many ways by the media online. There's quite a few articles coming through. I'll tell you what, because of the sensational nature of this, it would have been quite easy to make this about bad journalism rather than about the archaeology.
It is true. It is true. Let's not do that.
Yes. Otherwise, we would be guilty of exactly the same thing. It would have been too easy. It was shooting fish in a barrel, wouldn't it? Yes. This, however, is a perfectly straightforward, a nuanced piece that I'm going to read from Live Science, and the piece is by Tom Metcalf. The headline is Neolithic women in Europe were tied up and buried alive in ritual sacrifices. Study suggests. Good choice of words there, actually. It says the murder of sacrificial victims by incaprettamento, tying their neck to their legs bent behind their back so that they effectively strangled themselves, seems to have been a tradition across much of Neolithic Europe, with a new study identifying more than a dozen such murders over more than 2,000 years. The study comes after a reassessment of an ancient tomb that was discovered more than 20 years ago at Saint-Paul-Trois-Châteaux near Avignon in southern France. The tomb mimics a silo, or a pit, where grain was stored, and it held the remains of 3 women who were buried there about 5,500 years ago. The new study, published April the 10th in the journal Science Advances, reinterprets the positions of those two of the skeletons and suggests the individuals were deliberately killed, first by tying them up in the manner called incaprettamento, and then by burying them while they were still alive, perhaps for an agricultural ritual. So apologies for my light-heartedness at the beginning of this piece. It's certainly not in any way to be mocked or laughed at, because this was a pretty nasty end for.
It's utterly horrendous, actually, isn't it? And that in itself raises so many questions about the brutality of sacrifice. But why any people would think it necessary to put the maximum amount of suffering into the sacrifice itself is quite strange. But there's various angles that we could take on this to begin with, aren't there? I mean, certainly the fact that it arises in different locations. I mean, the paper actually talks about 14 locations where this has been interpreted. You can't say with 100% certainty that.
Does the 14 include the rock art?
I believe it does.
Okay, fair enough.
I'm not absolutely sure of that, but I think it does. But the thing that I find questionable, if I may dare, is the fact that they're talking about this being a custom when you're only talking about 14 sites and 20 instances over 2,000 years. And that, to me, okay, there's all sorts of ways of killing people, but that doesn't really give a sufficient number to call it a cultural practice, to me, anyway.
Yeah, and the kind of way you've gone straight to the crux of the matter is that from an archaeological point of view, there's little to dispute about the horrific endings of the remains that have been found. I think in some instances it's not done and dusted. That is exactly the same kind of dispatch that was being observed. But there's an interesting point around this, and I think the paper makes this point early on, is that knee-jerk reaction, if I can use that phrase, has been to interpret this kind of ritual sacrifice, and I'm not talking about the incaprettamento type, it's just any kind of sacrifice, which is, aside from the normal burial practice, where we've got incongruous burial circumstances like this, have been interpreted as evidence for strong hierarchical hierarchies in society, where people have been dispatched in order to accompany their lords, masters, whatever, to the afterlife. And I think one of the important things about this is shifting this study, if anything else is shifting the emphasis a bit the other way, where they're pretty sure that what they're looking at are sacrifices in order to do with agriculture and as offerings to the cosmos, gods, whatever you like, in order to improve the harvest, because and that's the important point that they emphasize, and that's around these burials being in silos or grain storage areas, it seems, if not actual pits, actual silos, then some kind of hole that's been made to mimic them. And also there's the solstice aspect, certainly at the Saint-Paul-Trois-Châteaux site, where you've got an alignment associated with them. So there's something much more to do in terms of an offering, to whatever associated with this, rather than vassals following their lords and masters into the afterlife. So that's one thing to get out of the way.
And it's a very good point, but interesting, focusing, because, the main focus is on the Saint-Paul-Trois-Châteaux site in the Rhône, that you've got these two women. Now, it's interesting that some of that across the entire sample, so all the different sites that they've looked at, they're not always women. Women seem to have been the majority, but there have been a couple of instances where it was male. But the thing is, in this burial, three women, that two of the women are executed in this way, if I can use that word. The other woman, it's like a traditional burial. So they, and also because of the shape of what they're calling a silo. So basically, you've got the entrance, so you could look down into this circular hole, and then it sort of fans out like a vase almost. Now, the two women who were sacrificed were actually pushed under the underhang of the shape of the silo. So if you were just looking straight down into this hole at the burial, you wouldn't have seen the two women who were kind of tucked underneath. That raises all sorts of questions, doesn't it? What's the... okay, there's no way that we could ever know what the thought processes were in this context, but it's just so strange that you would have this main burial, primary burial, and then the two people sacrificed to go alongside it are hidden out of view. It's just so intriguing and bewildering, really.
Well, it is. It's the interpretation of a murder scene. That's all there is to it, you know.
Yes. Yeah, that's true.
However many years, 5,000 years removed?
Yes,
you know,
5.5.
It's an incredible murder mystery, and it is open to interpretation. And I think the interpretation is fair given the circumstances, but it could be not quite right at all. I mean, for instance, the interpretation that the grinding stones, the broken grinding stones that have been landed on top of them or between them or what have you, was part of the execution process. That's another matter entirely. Was designed to hold them in place. Whether they actually were, whether their self-strangulation took place in situ in that hole, in other words, they were kind of interred alive, that's up for debate. And, you know, I suppose your imagination can take you whichever way it does, but imagination only takes you so far. And I think this is the point at which, given the tools that are available to archaeologists and others at this moment in time, from a mathematical point of view, has tempted, in our view, our humble view, maybe we're missing something, has tempted them into a realm where I'm not quite sure the results are going to be accurate. And that is the realm where, in the absence of being able to absolutely interpret each one of these instances with absolute security, techniques have been turned to, which, you know, are part of statistics and analysis and spreadsheets, and are applied in other areas of archaeology as well. That is Bayesian analysis of C14 dating, to narrow down to make the dates we have available more and more granular and more accurate. And they've taken the various aspects of these 20 instances, 14 locations, and devised means to apply Bayesian statistical analysis to them in order to extrapolate some kind of certainties about the correlations between them and an overall interpretation of the whole phenomenon. Have I got that about right, do you think?
Yeah, you have. Yeah, you have. And, you know, we just feel quite strongly that 20 instances isn't enough of a sample to...
no matter how many times you iterate the equation applied to it. And I think I saw the number 1 million iterations of the, you know, of the algorithm applied to the data in order to extrapolate some kind of surety.
So it is an interesting. It's an interesting stance. It's an interesting approach. For me, I think that the most important aspect of this is that what you can say is that this was a known way of sacrificing people. I don't think it. In many ways, I don't think it's necessary to try to create stronger patterns from it. I'm utterly bewildered by this thing. I mean, even, for example, you take some of the bloodiest races in history. So you look at, say, the Aztecs and and their sacrificial approaches to try to appease the gods, that they were pretty hastily dispatched, even if it was disgusting. And so it's the fact that there is such wanton suffering caused in this style of sacrifice that, you know, what was their belief system where they thought that that's what the gods wanted?
Yeah. And I think the problem that comes out of it, the phraseology or the term of phrase that they've turned to in order to describe this. If I go back to the article where, sorry, I've forgotten his name, Tom Metcalf is describing what it's Eric Crusoe. Is that right? Who's the lead archaeologist on this, and was involved in the original excavation of the Saint-Paul-Trois-Châteaux site 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. And it was only when he learned about the practice that the mafia still use of incaprettamento as a murder or a punishment thing that a penny dropped for him, and he was able to go back to the data and the illustrations in this excavation and reinterpret what had been found there. But anyway, so Crusoe said it appears incaprettamento originated as a sacrificial custom in the Mesolithic period, before agriculture, and later came to be used for human sacrifices associated with agriculture in the Neolithic period. As a method of human sacrifice, incaprettamento seems to have been widespread across much of Neolithic Europe, with evidence of the practice at sites ranging from the Czech Republic to Spain. The earliest is a tomb near Brno Buonici in the Czech Republic that is dated about 5400 BC, and the latest is the tomb at Saint-Paul-Trois-Châteaux, suggesting that the practice persisted for more than 2,000 years, Crusoe said. So you've got, we've only got 14 places, including some rock art, where this is being pointed at. So even if we're being kind and say, spread the 20 instances, individuals, across 2,000 years, that's one case of incaprettamento every 100 years.
Yes.
What if you were looking back from now, back to, just 20 instances of some event since the Romans were here? Would you dare to start drawing inferences about traditions and links and that something was widespread from that? Now, admittedly, you're not going to. This is not referring to all instances that ever were of this practice in prehistory. Archaeological evidence doesn't work like that. But even so, using words such as widespread and
I do agree. And also, I think a strange thing, really, when it comes to the interpretation is, well, if you've based this, not based it, that's a bit unfair, but if what's triggered this is the recognition that the mafia still use it today, then why are we not saying that this is a practice that carried on for 6,000 or 7,000 years?
There you go. Yes, hit the nail on the head there. Now, we're not in any way trying to downplay this at all. As I said before, obviously this happened and it's horrible, and it's part of our remit, looking into prehistory, to looking, as Hamlet says, to hold the mirror up to nature.
Yes, we are an extraordinary species, aren't we?
Yeah.
When it comes to finding ways of causing suffering, well, we do put the effort in. I'll tell you one of the things, though, that another thing that I find intriguing about the Trois-Châteaux site is that so you have this structure that is, there's no question about the fact that it's a solstitial alignment, and there are two burial pits, and the pits are slightly to one side inside the structure. So, there's no way that you can be certain, but my interpretation of that was that the actual ceremony, if you like, was what happened in the direct path of the setting sun, and then once done, the burials were slightly to one side. That may or may not be the case. But what I find intriguing here is that you have a primary burial that is an ordinary burial. Ordinary. Yeah. There's no suffering or sacrificial aspect to the main person in the burial. But nevertheless, the structure is solstitial. So what? Did they wait for somebody who died around the solstice? How did that all play out? What was the relevance of these people to this solstice alignment? It raises so many questions to the actual practice and the context here. It's quite intriguing.
You're back to interpretation of an incredibly complex murder scene.
Yes.
What is amazing, to me, is that there's whatever happened there's a lot of elaboration around it. Did the building come first or afterwards? Because there's these
good question.
Wooden structure around it, and somebody's gone to an awful lot of effort to mark this place. And the alignments and so on and so forth. So, whatever happened, however the two women were dispatched, there's an element of huge significance about them or the site, all the three of them together. I don't know. I think we've aired our sort of take on the paper and the whole thing.
I think so.
It's only fair to put a link down below to the actual paper itself. Be warned, it's not the easiest of reads.
No, it's not.
Hands up those who actually understand Bayesian analysis. Confess. A little bit, sort of.
Yeah.
A sort of basic principle, but how look, I'm sure the idea behind it is perfectly sincere, and the wanting to get a result from this scattered data over time and space. It's not just the time gaps. This is all over Europe.
Yeah.
Again, so drawing in links is a bit of a spurious thing. And if there's good reason to throw the data at a number crunching thing to get some kind of firm results, firm connections, firm repetition of principles at work here, beyond the mere method of murder, that's another thing. And if anybody, please, comment below if you can see deeper into that than we're doing. But on the face of it, from our point of view, it seems a bit of a reach to expect a decent result. Would it stand up in a court of law? I think that's the basic question. If you were trying to solve these murders, and you'd come in as an expert, and you'd thrown the data into an algorithm, and come back with the result, would it really be accepted by a jury, or even be admissible in a court of law? I don't think so, but that's me.
No.
Hey ho. Anything more before we leave it alone, Rupert?
No, I don't think so. Because there's just so many rabbit holes that we could dive into. That I think it's interesting. There you are. We've given you our take on it, and see what you think. And as Michael said, do feel free to comment and let us know what you think.
Yeah. Yeah, feel free to comment. Also, feel free to like and subscribe.
Yes, please do.
Even more than that, feel free to follow the links down in the description to our Patreon page. It all makes sense. And also, we've got a fantastic project going on at the moment called Göbekli Tepe to Stonehenge. More of that if you follow the link down below. And maybe have a look at the video up there that I'm putting up there. Okay, that's it for now. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, folks.
Stay well, and see you again very soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ooh, 24 minutes. Nearly 25
how did that
minutes.
happen, even?
What do we like?
Actually, do you know what? I thought that was all right. There wasn't really any waffle in that.